2024 with our dogs. And I want to just do a slight shift of focus, I think, this year. That's something I want to really work on. Hiya, Fiona. And I almost, sounds a bit strange really, I want to work a little bit less on training per se and think more about collaboration and cooperation between human and dog. So that we are always being very intentional about what we are asking our dogs to do, and more importantly, why we're asking them to do it, and whose best interest is it in, and what's in it for everybody, so that we can end up with everybody feeling super happy and contented and have a brilliant quality of life. I can't turn the sound up from here, Fiona, I'm afraid. Have a look and see if you can sort that on your computer, I think. I don't have any sound settings on Facebook Live. It's a little bit primitive like that, unfortunately. I'll try and talk louder, though. Although I think I am quite loud, generally, as a human. Anyway, so I gave a little indication, I think, last Tuesday on the page of the sort of things that I was kind of thinking about moving into this year. So one thing that I think would be a great way to make a brilliant start for this year, and that's to do just a little diary for your dog. So maybe decide that you are going to put aside, I don't know, 5 minutes a day for 2 weeks. And you are just going to note some very simple things about your dog and what's happened to them today and how they've behaved. So the sort of things that I would be making a note of. So one of them would be their sleep patterns. So as far as you know, obviously you don't know if you're not there, but as far as you know, how often have they been asleep? How much time have they spent asleep? And when they are asleep, do you feel like they're sleeping deeply, or are they having quite a lot of periods of quite light sleep? Now, you don't have to go into masses and massive detail, because obviously you could be there all day. But an example of that might be, if I was going to do it for Hattie, I might say slept through the night, woke up at 7 o'clock when I went in, and then slept for another 4 hours in until about 12 o'clock when she was quite active, and that was good sleep. In the afternoon, had more disturbed sleep for about another 3 hours. So something like that. So, and you can, I would come up with a little code. So just to make it really easy for you. So you could have G for good sleep, and you could have D for disturbed sleep, or something like that. And over the day, just say, okay, approximately how much do I think that they've had today? The other thing that I'll be looking at is what they're eating and drinking, and how often they're eating and drinking. So, you know, you might have it that you feed your dogs at particular days, at particular times of the day, every single day, and you've got a proper routine. But then there's going to be the odd day when maybe a little bit late, maybe you're a little bit early. How is that? So you want to make a note of those times. There could be other people like me who have a much more free and easy way of giving your dogs food and don't necessarily have fixed feeding times. I think I probably have more of a fixed feeding time in the morning than I do in the evening, when I tend to mix it up a little bit more. And then there's a little bit more feeding through treats and things through the day if we're doing any training. So then I would be making sure, and this is something I've, as I say, I've had to do with hats lately, that I'm making a note of what protein sources are in the food, if there's grains, for example, in any of the food or treats that they're being given. So it's about making those kind of notes, because what you're going to be looking for is, are there any particular foods that trigger a particular type of behaviour in your dog? So the thing I'm looking for with Hattie is which protein sources seem to make her feel more unsettled, because I know that she has gastric pain some of the time. So I'm really trying to get to the bottom of exactly what it is that sets that off. And it's quite difficult to do. We've done all sorts of exclusion diets, so now we're just doing a bit of a diary to really get a better idea of exactly what's going on. Another thing that I'd be making a little bit of a note on in your diary is any play or training or interaction time that you've had. So not only your dog's interaction and play with you, but anybody else that they have interacted with. So whether that's, if you're other people in the house, so other adults or children or visitors or even people out on walks, have they interacted with anybody? Regardless of what happens, what interactions were they and how did they go? Because you could find, and a really common one, for example, is if you've got, people who have children that visit the house, for example, on those days, the dog will behave afterwards, their behaviour will become far, far more challenging. And that's because of the kind of the stress levels that are inherent with children as a rule. So that's another thing that you can put in your diary, which is going to be really useful to have a look at. And again, code it, make it simple for yourself, make it as easy as you possibly can. The other thing that you might make a note of is if you've got, if you're doing any interaction time or play time with your dog, just make it, have a look. Are they playing and interacting as they normally would? Has there been any change? So are they a bit slower than they were? That can sometimes indicate a bit of discomfort, that kind of thing. And then you want to look at any outings or exercise that you've had that day. So have you been for a walk? What sort of walk was it? Was it on the roads? Was it in the countryside? Were there lots of dogs? Was it really quiet? Those kind of things is what we're looking for. Was it on lead? Was it off lead? Were there people around? Did people try to talk to your dog? Did they have to go into a pub? Those kind of things. Again, it's just going to be making a note. And it feels like, when I'm talking about it now, it feels like a heck of a lot. But actually, when you think of what you're actually doing physically day to day, that cuts it down massively. You're not going to be doing like all the things every single day. And you'll find that a lot of the things that you do most days are quite similar. And things that your dog does most days, there are patterns that you can kind of summarize. So that's what we'd be doing as well. The other things that I'd be looking at are things that are kind of external to the dog. So stuff like, what's the weather like? I've said before, I think with stormy weather, Hattie struggles massively. It's a huge thing for her, and it can have a big impact on a lot of dogs. But also, what about your mood? How were you feeling that day? Because how you feel and how your dog feels are going to have a super interlink. So if you're up for it, try it for just 2 weeks. If you don't want to do all the things that I've mentioned, perhaps you could pick a couple of them for 2 weeks and then do a couple of other ones for 2 weeks. And as you're going through each day, what was your dog like? How would you describe in one word how they were? So were they unsettled? Were they on edge? That's 2 words, isn't it? But you get what I'm saying. Unless you hyphenate it. Can you hyphenate it? Don't know. Anyway. Were they on edge? Were they really calm and snoozy and chilled out and relaxed? What were they like? And then can you find any connections between what you've written in your diary of the things that happened and your dog's behaviour? And it's just lots and lots of lovely information. Not only does it give you information as what's directly affecting your dog, but it also means that we are sort of stopping and thinking about all the things that are going on for our dogs that will affect how they behave and how they are and how they feel. And that really starts to make you think, oh, hang on a minute, that's kind of what the world looks like for my dog. That's kind of, where the kind, sometimes it's that X factor, that little thing that you're kind of thinking, oh, I'm not quite sure what it is that's making the difference. And this could be a really good way of pinpointing it. So particularly if you're a person who has been working on behaviour with a dog and you feel a little bit stuck, this can be a great way to unstick. So to unplug this sticking point and get you moving again. Because you're stopping looking at things very much from a task-oriented approach. So approach, right, this is what I want my dog to achieve. And instead of looking at that, you're looking at things much more from the dog's perspective. How is my dog feeling about things? Which will then affect how they are behaving. Do you see what I mean? So it's really changing your approach to how you're feeling, how you're, how you are approaching working with your dog. Because, if we think about it, if we just work on a specific task with a dog, so say we are saying, I want my dog to be able to come to the pub with me. So the task they need to do is to be able to lie down, to be able to lie quietly next to me while I eat my dinner, and not to do very much. That's the task we want them to achieve. If we just think of it from a task perspective, then the means and the methods of how we do that and why our dog behaves that way or otherwise become less relevant. All we're focusing on is, can I get to that end point? Loose lead walking, absolute blooming classic. So if you've got a dog on that pulls and pulls and pulls and lead, the task you want them to achieve is to walk next to you with a nice loose lead. However, if we can dig into it from the dog's perspective and look at things through the lens of their eyes, we can actually see, well, what is it about the world that means that they want to be over there while you're walking over here? And that's got to be the key. And yes, there are ways of achieving the task, getting them to walk next to you, without worrying about any of that other stuff. However, they are well and good if you're dealing with a robot, but when you're dealing with a feeling, living, breathing creature, a lot of them are just simply inappropriate or even cruel. So that's the kind of shift that I'm really focusing on, I think, in 2024 with the work that I'm doing. And as I say, I think keeping a diary of, your dog's lived experience is a really great place to start to help you unstick some of those sticky points with your training. Let's imagine that you do that for 2 weeks and you discover that your adolescent dog is maybe only getting 8 hours of good sleep in every 24. The rest of the time they're pretty vigilant, or they're napping with one eye open pretty much, because every time anyone sneezes, they're all over the shop. And you've got a dog that's pulling on the lead, is super reactive, etc., etc. Well, that lack of sleep is a massive piece of that puzzle. So, then you can think to yourself, okay, how can then I try and help my dog to have more sleep? And it just changes that perspective a little bit. So that is kind of our perspective. Now, in terms of what we're asking our dogs to do, when we look at it from that task-oriented approach, we are thinking of, I want my dog to be able to do a sit. I want my dog to be able to do a down. I want my dog to be able to stay. I want them to be able to give me their paw. All these things. And, there is a place for all of those things. But when we're training them, why are we training them? So the first thing that pretty much everybody does when they bring a new dog home is to go, right, I'm going to teach it to sit. I'm going to teach it to sit. And they teach this dog to sit in front of them. Now, there are lots of reasons for a dog to have a brilliant sit. And I use them a lot in behaviour work. I use a sit quite a lot with a lot of dogs in behaviour work that I do. However, the reason I do that is because we are working on a way that the dog is struggling, whereas sit is going to help them. Rather than just getting my dog to sit because, well, that's just what you do, isn't it? I know those of you who are my sort of age in the UK, you might remember Barbara Woodhouse and the Raising Dogs the Woodhouse Way, which was a terrible way to train dogs. It was absolutely awful. And it was all about getting dogs to comply. I want my dog to be obedient. I want my dog to do everything I say. It's like, well, we've completely forgotten that they're a creature. We might as well swap them for a robot of some description. And the problem is we've got other people on telly still, and they're using the same approach. It's just hasn't moved on TV dog trainers pretty much at all. But we need to be better than that. So let me give you an example with a sit. Let's say I was working with a whippet, and their owner is saying, well, this dog, they're so stubborn, totally untrainable, they can't even do a sit. Okay, why do you want the whippet to do a sit? Well, because then they are a good dog, and because I've asked them to, and it makes them look like a good dog. Okie dokie. Yet, from the dog's point of view, for a dog like a whippet, for example, it's really, really common with whippets, which is why I chose that breed, for them to find a sit really uncomfortable, particularly on certain surfaces. So for them, a sit isn't appropriate. You know, if there was a training reason or a behavioural reason or a real reason for the dog's safety or for people's safety or for, you know, any other good reasons that are in the dog's best interest as well as the human's best interest, there are other things that we can do instead of a sit which aren't going to be punishing to the dog, because a sit, as I say, for some dogs it's punishing, it's uncomfortable. If you've got a dog that's got hip problems, and there are, oh my gosh, there are so many dogs with hip problems or lower spine problems around the place, it's amazing. Or soft muscle, actually, soft tissue issues, huge. So they're trying to sit down, it's like, oh, it's a bit ouchy, but I'm going to do it because my human wants me to, and I'm a really good dog. But then your human's saying, well, you're being really stubborn, why aren't you just doing what I asked straight away? And that's what we need to be moving away from. It's that kind of conversation that we don't realise that we're having with our dogs because we're not listening. We're not listening to where they're coming from. So, and I'm going to put this out there, and it's another little point to consider. If you have a dog who feels super safe with you, trusts you completely, knows you won't ask them to do anything that's unpleasant or painful unless it's, you know, unless it's for a, you know, going to the vet or something that they have to do, unless it's for a really, really good reason that's in their best interest, and you have a fantastic connection with them, then the vast majority of behavioural issues, so long as this dog is healthy and not in pain or discomfort, the vast majority of any behavioural issues that you have will become much easier to manage because you've got that connection and you've got that trust and you've got that bond. And I think that's kind of that's the way that a lot of you know, the dog behaviour community is going these days. It's really looking at that two-way street of two different species who are finding a way to work together. And we're moving further away from that kind of sergeant major, you'll just do it because I tell you to. And if you look for things like assistant dogs, so if you look at your guide dogs, for example, and how they're trained in a super collaborative way. And that's why they're so brilliant, because they allow, they feel that safe that they allow their human to feel super safe as well. And they have that, I mean, you've probably seen them, haven't you? They have owners with their guide dogs have the most amazing connection. And if we can get that with our pet dogs, then we can end up with that kind of connection and that kind of movement forward. But as I said before, right at the start, you know, for if you've got that diary, what you become aware of is actually some of us might have a dog that, you know, is pretty antisocial, or they might have a dog that, you know, feels uncomfortable in crowded spaces. And if we're aware of that and we don't force our dog into that, and we're prepared to compromise for the good of the dog as well as, you know, for the good of ourselves, we're going to end up with in a much better place with a much better trained dog, and everybody being happier, and it's all just going to be a wonderful thing. So let me just have got a couple of questions. Vanessa, don't you panic. I'll let you off. There won't be a detention. You'll be delighted to hear. Laura, you've got the window cleaner is a massive trigger in your house. Yeah, and that's really, really common. And you can kind of see why from the dog's point of view. It's they're doing something really weird. And the dog's like, what the heck is going on? This feels really difficult. Now, for me, if I had a dog that was struggling with the window cleaner, if I could, I would take the dog out when the window cleaner was there, because there is absolutely and literally nothing to be gained from having a dog that's stressed out by a window cleaner. Um, you know, you're not going to teach them to get over it by having them there, and your just behaviours will go horrible the rest of the place. However, I don't think I've ever had a window cleaner that sends me a little message that says I'm coming round on this day at this time. They just kind of turn up, don't they? So kind of a bit impossible. So you will, unless you have a really friendly one that you could say, look, could you just text me when you're about to come over, and we'll take the pop the dog in the car or something like that. That can be quite useful. So we've got to be realistic. What would I do? You could try doing distractions. Sometimes it doesn't necessarily make it better. Um, you know, distracting a dog when they're in a super stressful situation. It's like, do you, you know, giving me a piece of cake when you're dangling me out of a helicopter? It's not actually going to help a huge amount, but you could try it just in case it does help. And then what you'd want to do, because if you're in that unavoidable situation, you know, be there for your dog. Try and put yourself, you know, make sure that they know that you're there. Don't tell them off. Don't make it worse by kind of, you know, barking at the window cleaner as well, or shouting, you know, but make sure that they know that you're there, that you've got this. It's all, you know, it's all going to be okay. And then afterwards, lots of nice calm time, you know, allow them to decompress, allow them to do nothing. You know, with the kids, for example, give them a bit of space from the kids, just to have a proper bit of as much chill time as you possibly can. We choose licky mats, all those passive calming activities. So there's naturally calming activities, sniffing, licking, chewing. Those are the things to focus off just to help them bring those hormones down again. But yeah, I think the window cleaner is a really tricky one to deal with. Absolutely. Right, is there anything else?